pilot can't land until the flight attendant reveals a secret technique. Captain Robert Anderson gripped the controls of the Boeing 737 so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Flight 2847 of Liberty Airways should have landed at LaGuardia 45 minutes ago, but for the third time in a row he aborted the approach at the last second. The 120 passengers on board were growing restless, murmuring among themselves, while the co-pilot Brian tried to understand what was happening with his commander. Robert was known throughout American aviation for his impeccable 32-year career, without a single incident on record. "Commander, is everything all right?" Brian asked, watching Robert's trembling hands on the controls. "I need more time," Robert replied hoarsely, avoiding the co-pilot's gaze. Jennifer Miller, the chief flight attendant with 15 years of experience, observed everything through the crack in the cockpit door. There was something in Robert's posture that she recognized, something that reminded her of painful moments in her own life. The LaGuardia control tower was losing patience. A metallic voice crackled over the radio. "Flight 2847, you've occupied this airspace for over an hour. Explain the situation immediately." Robert picked up the microphone with shaky hands. "Tower, this is Commander Anderson. We're checking some instruments. We need a few more minutes." Jennifer knew it was a lie. The instruments were fine. She had checked all the cockpit indicators herself. The problem was with the pilot, and for some reason she didn't yet understand, he simply couldn't land the plane. "Commander, the passengers are getting nervous," Brian said. "Maybe I should take control." "No," Robert shouted, startling everyone in the cockpit. "I'm sorry, I need to be the one to land this plane." Jennifer knocked gently on the door and stepped inside. Robert stared at her with glazed eyes as if seeing a ghost. "Commander Anderson, can I help with anything?" she asked in a calm, maternal voice. "There's nothing you can do, Jennifer. This is on me." But Jennifer didn't leave. She had raised 2 children alone after losing her husband young, had cared for her mother with Alzheimer's until her final days, and knew when someone was fighting inner demons. "Commander, I'm not just a flight attendant. I'm a mother, a daughter, and I know when someone is carrying a weight they can't put down alone." Robert looked at her in surprise. No subordinate had ever spoken to him that way, but there was something in Jennifer's tone that soothed him. "Tower to Flight 2847, final warning. Declare an emergency or land immediately," the radio blared. "Brian, tell them we're dealing with a minor technical issue. It'll be resolved soon," Robert said, though everyone knew there was no technical issue. Jennifer moved closer to the commander and whispered, "Commander, 20 years ago I learned a technique that saved my life and the lives of many people I love. Can I try to help you?" Robert looked at her skeptically. "A technique? What are you talking about?" "A breathing and focus technique I learned when my mother had her first panic attack. She taught me how to help people trapped in their own minds." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Co-pilot Brian watched the scene in disbelief. He never imagined he'd see the legendary Commander Anderson in such a vulnerable state. "Jennifer, with all due respect, you don't understand. I've been a pilot for 3 decades. I've landed in storms, with engines failing, in conditions you can't even imagine. The problem isn't technical." "I know," she replied, sitting on the small bench behind the pilots. "That's why I'm offering help, because I know the problem is here." And she pointed to Robert's chest. Robert closed his eyes and for the first time admitted aloud, "Today marks exactly 15 years. 15 years of what, Commander?" 15 years since my son Michael died in a car accident. He was only 17. And today was his birthday. He would have been 32 today." Jennifer felt her heart tighten. Suddenly everything made sense. The date, the nervousness, the inability to land. "And what does that have to do with not being able to land?" asked Brian, genuinely confused. Robert swallowed hard. "On the day of the accident I was flying. It was my day off, but I took an extra flight. Michael called me saying he needed to talk, that it was urgent. I told him we'd talk when I got back, that I couldn't miss that flight. Tears began rolling down the commander's face. When I landed, there were 7 missed calls from him on my phone, and then I got the call from the hospital. Jennifer reached out and gently touched Robert's shoulder. "Commander, you're not responsible for what happened to Michael. I could have stayed. I could have refused the flight. If I'd been there. If you'd been there, maybe both of you would have been lost that day," Jennifer interrupted. "We can't change the past, but we can choose how to live with it." The plane continued circling over New York, burning precious fuel. The passengers were growing visibly nervous, and some were already demanding explanations from the other flight attendants. "Tower to Flight 2847, we are declaring an emergency. Prepare for an emergency landing," came the authoritative voice over the radio. "No!" Robert shouted. "No one's forcing us to do anything. I'm landing this plane." But his hand still trembled on the controls. Jennifer took a deep breath and said, "Commander, close your eyes." "Jennifer, this isn't the time." "Close your eyes," she repeated with motherly firmness. "Trust me." Reluctantly, Robert closed his eyes. "Now breathe with me, slowly. Inhale for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold for 4 seconds, and exhale for 4 counts. "Jennifer, this is ridiculous." "Do it with me, Commander. It's the first part of the technique I learned from my mother." Robert followed the instructions, though clearly skeptical. Brian watched silently, ready to take control at any moment. "Keep breathing like this and tell me, what was Michael like as a child?" "Why do you want to know that?" "Because it's part of the technique. I need you to connect with the good memories, not just the pain." Robert hesitated, but something in Jennifer's voice reassured him. "Michael was a very curious child. Curious. Always asking how things worked. When I came home from work, he wanted to know about the planes, the clouds, what it was like to fly." "Keep breathing and keep talking. What else do you remember about him?" "He loved when I took him to watch planes take off at LaGuardia. We'd sit for hours in the observation area, and I'd explain every model, every procedure." Robert's hands began to relax slightly on the controls. He said he wanted to be a pilot like his dad. But then he got interested in engineering, wanted to design planes instead of flying them. "And how did that make you feel?" "Proud. So proud. He was smarter than me, more studious, had his whole future ahead of him." Robert's voice grew steadier, though tears still fell. "Commander, now I want you to imagine Michael today at 32. What would he be like?" "Jennifer, this will only make it worse. Trust the technique. What would he be like at 32? Robert took a deep breath following the rhythm Jennifer had established. He would be a brilliant engineer. Maybe he'd already have a family. Maybe he'd have given me grandchildren. He'd be taller than me. He was always tall for his age. And what do you think he'd say if he saw you now, unable to do what you've done for 3 decades because of guilt?" Robert opened his eyes and looked at Jennifer. "How do you know so much about loss?" "Because I've also lost someone very important, Commander, and I've learned that we honor those who've gone by living fully, not by destroying ourselves for them." "Tower to Flight 2847, final warning before military interception," came the tense voice over the radio. "Brian, tell them we'll begin approach in 2 minutes," said Robert, and for the first time his voice sounded steady. "Are you sure, Commander?" "Jennifer, finish your technique," said Robert, ignoring the co-pilot's question. "The last part is the most important, Commander. You need to forgive yourself." "How do I do that?" "By looking Michael in the eyes in your memory and telling him you did the best you could at that moment, that you love him, and that you'll keep honoring his memory by being the best pilot you can be." Robert closed his eyes again and, in silence, spoke to the son he hadn't seen in 15 years. Brian and Jennifer watched as the commander's expression slowly transformed. "Michael," Robert whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I chose work. But I promise I'll honor your memory. I'll keep flying, like you love to see me do." When he opened his eyes, his hands were steady on the controls. "Tower, this is Flight 2847, requesting permission for final approach. Commander Anderson assuming full control." "Flight 2847, Approach authorized. Runway 35L cleared. Jennifer returned to her station, but not before whispering in Robert's ear, "Commander, Michael would be proud to see his father land this plane safely." Robert executed the smoothest approach turn of his entire career. Every movement of the controls was precise, every adjustment calculated with the perfection of 3 decades of experience. "Landing gear down and locked," announced Brian. "Flaps in landing position," confirmed Robert. "Speed stabilized," said Brian, amazed at the commander's precision. The Boeing 737 touched down at LaGuardia with such smoothness that it drew spontaneous applause from the passengers. They didn't know they had just witnessed much more than a simple landing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. After all the passengers had disembarked, Robert remained seated in the cockpit, still processing what had happened. Jennifer returned and sat beside him. "How did you learn that technique?" he asked. "It wasn't easy, Commander. When my husband Kevin passed away, I had 2 small children and didn't know how to move forward. My mother, Mrs. Elizabeth, taught me that grief isn't something we overcome, but something we learn to carry with dignity." "And did it work for you?" "Not right away. It took years of therapy, sleepless nights, blaming myself for not seeing the signs of his depression. But my mother always said, 'Jennifer, the dead don't return, but the living must keep living.'" Robert stayed silent for a few minutes, absorbing her words. 15 years, Jennifer. 15 years. I've avoided flying on Michael's birthday. Today was the first time I couldn't cancel. And why was today different? Because the company is making cuts. If I cancelled another flight without a medical reason, I could lose my job. And at 57, starting over isn't easy. So deep down you knew you'd have to face this someday. Maybe. But I never imagined it would be like this, in the middle of a flight with 120 people depending on me. Jennifer smiled. Sometimes life forces us to face our fears when we least expect it. But look at you, you didn't just face it, you overcame it. With your help, Robert admitted. If you hadn't stepped in, you would have found a way. Maybe not today, maybe not the same way, but you would have found it. Men like you always do. What do you mean? Men who've dedicated their lives to protecting others. You might have forgotten temporarily, but deep down, you always knew you couldn't let those passengers down. Robert let out a deep sigh. You know what's most ironic? Michael always said he wanted me to stop flying because he worried about me, said aviation was too dangerous. And what did you tell him? That I was born to fly, that I couldn't stop, and that he didn't need to worry because I was too careful to get into trouble. And you were right, look at your career. 3 decades without a single accident. But on the day he needed me most, I was in the skies instead of by his side. Jennifer turned to face him. "Commander, can I ask you a tough question?" "Of course." "If you'd known that would be Michael's last day, would you have spent it flying or stayed with him?" "With him, obviously." "Then the problem wasn't your choice. The problem was that you didn't know it was his last day, and that's no one's fault." Robert felt as if a 15-year weight was slowly lifting from his shoulders. "Jennifer, can I ask how you lost your husband?" "Kevin had severe depression. We didn't know at the time. We thought it was just work exhaustion. He was an accountant and had a really demanding season every year. One day he just decided he couldn't go on anymore." "I'm so sorry." "Thank you. It was 12 years ago." "It was 12. My kids, Jason and Ashley, were 8 and 10 at the time. Those were the hardest years of my life." "And how did you manage to move forward?" "Day by day, hour by hour sometimes. My mother helped me a lot. She always said Kevin wouldn't have wanted me to stop living because of him." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was. She passed 3 years ago. Alzheimer's." "I'm sorry, Jennifer. You've been through so much." "We all have, Commander. The difference is how we choose to handle what we've been through." They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in thought. "Jennifer, that breathing technique, do you use it with other passengers?" "Whenever I need to. You'd be surprised how many people have a fear of flying or are going through tough times. Sometimes a conversation, a breathing exercise, can completely change someone's flight. And does it always work? Not always the way we expect, but it always helps in some way. What matters is showing people they're not alone. Robert stood and extended his hand to Jennifer. Thank you, not just for the technique, but for seeing past the uniform, past the rank, and seeing a man who needed help. Commander, can I tell you a secret? Of course. I knew your story. Robert looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? Michael's story is famous among the senior flight attendants, not the details, but we know you have one day a year when you always cancel flights, and we know why. And you never said anything? It wasn't my place, until today. Today, you were putting passengers at risk, and then it became my place to step in. And if I'd refused your help, then I would have spoken to the co-pilot to take command. But I hoped you'd accept because I knew if you faced this, it would set you free. Robert shook his head in admiration. You planned all this? I didn't plan anything, Commander. I just recognized a suffering soul and offered what I could. That's what my mother taught me. Always offer what you can, even if it seems small. And where did you learn so much about grief and loss? In life, Commander. And in some books my therapist recommended. When you lose someone important, you seek out anything that might help. Do you still go to therapy? I do. Once a month for maintenance. I've learned that caring for the mind is just as important as caring for the body. Robert grew thoughtful. You know, Jennifer, I've never sought professional help. I always thought I could handle it on my own. And you did, for 15 years. But sometimes we need help to cope better, to carry the weight more lightly. Do you think I should see a psychologist? I think you should do what you feel you need to do. Today you've already taken a huge step by admitting you were suffering and accepting help. Brian, who had stepped out to complete post-flight checks, returned to the cockpit. Commander, the control tower wants a report on what happened. Robert looked at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. I'll tell the truth, Brian, that I had a difficult personal moment, but it was resolved with the crew's support. Are you sure, sir? This might raise questions about your fitness to fly. I'm sure, and if they raise questions, I'll answer them honestly. I've hidden this for too long. After Brian left to deliver the report, Jennifer said, Commander, can I suggest something? Of course. How about on Michael's next birthday, instead of cancelling the flight, you fly in his honor? How do you mean? Make it the most perfect flight of your career. Remember how proud he was when you flew. Turn that day of pain into a day celebrating his memory. Robert smiled for the first time in a long while. You know, that makes sense. Michael always said I flew like an angel. Then fly like an angel on his Memorial Day. Show him wherever he is that his father is still the best pilot in the sky. Jennifer, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do your children know what you do for passengers? How you help people? They do. Jason, who's 20 now, studies psychology at NYU. He says I inspired him to choose that path. And Ashley? Ashley is 22 and a nurse. She also works helping people. I think they saw how I handled losing their father and learned that pain can turn into compassion. They must be very proud of you. I hope so, and I'm sure Michael would be proud of you today. Robert grew emotional again. How can you be so sure? Because you did exactly what a good pilot does. You put passenger safety above your own comfort. You faced your fears to protect 120 people. That's heroism, Commander. I don't feel like a hero. I feel relieved. Sometimes being a hero is simply doing what needs to be done, even when it's the hardest thing in the world. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. A week later, Robert approached Jennifer in the flight attendant's lounge. Jennifer, do you have a few minutes? Of course, Commander. Is something wrong? I wanted to tell you I found a psychologist. I had my first session yesterday. How was it? Hard, really hard, but necessary. He told me something similar to what you said, that grief isn't something we overcome, but something we learn to integrate into our lives. How did you feel afterward? Exhausted, but hopeful. For the first time in 15 years, I felt I could honor Michael's memory without destroying myself. I'm so glad to hear that, Commander. Jennifer, I'd like to invite you. What kind of invitation? Next month is Michael's birthday. Instead of canceling the flight, I want you to be my chief flight attendant that day. If you'd be willing, of course I will. It would be an honor. And there's one more thing. I want to create a project for the company. What kind of project? A psychological support program for crew members. I found out many pilots and flight attendants go through personal struggles that affect their work, but are afraid to seek help. Do you think the company would support it? I'll find out, and if they don't, I'll find another way to make it happen. You inspired me, Jennifer. Now I want to inspire others. I can help however you need. Actually, I'd like you to be my partner in this project. You have a way of connecting with people I've never seen before. Commander, I don't have a degree in psychology, but you have something you can't learn from books. You have heart and life experience. Sometimes that's worth more than any diploma. Jennifer was moved. It would be amazing to be part of something like this. Then it's settled. We'll change American aviation, one person at a time. 2 months later, the Mindful Flying program was officially launched by the airline. Robert and Jennifer began offering support sessions for crew members facing personal struggles. On Michael's birthday, Robert flew the most perfect flight of his career. Before takeoff, he looked at a photo of his son he'd placed on the dashboard and whispered, "This flight is for you, son, to show that your dad didn't stop flying. He just learned to fly with a peaceful heart." Jennifer, watching from the cabin, smiled. She knew she had helped save more than a flight that day 2 months ago. She had helped save a soul. During the flight, an elderly passenger began feeling unwell. Jennifer approached and recognized the signs of severe anxiety. "Are you okay?" "No. I can't breathe right. I'm afraid of flying, but I needed to visit my daughter in Miami." Jennifer sat beside her. "What's your name?" "Rose. Rose Williams." "Mrs. Rose, I'll teach you a breathing technique that always works. Want to try with me?" "Anything that might help." "Breathe in with me, counting to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold for 4 seconds and exhale in 4 counts." Mrs. Rose followed the instructions, and gradually her breathing steadied. "How did you learn this?" she asked. "A very wise person taught me that sometimes all we need is someone to breathe with us," Jennifer replied, thinking of her mother. "And does it always work?" "Not always the way we expect, but it always helps. The important thing is not facing fears alone." Mrs. Rose smiled. "You have a gift, dear. My daughter's a psychologist and always says the best therapists are those who've been through hardships. Your daughter sounds wise." "She is. And I'm sure she'd like you very much." When the plane landed in Miami, Mrs. Rose held Jennifer's hand. "Thank you for helping me. You turned what could have been the worst flight of my life into something special." "It was my pleasure, Mrs. Rose. And remember, next time you feel anxious, breathe slowly and remind yourself you're not alone." After all passengers disembarked, Robert came to Jennifer. "I saw you helping Mrs. Rose. How did it go?" "I used the same technique I used with you. It worked perfectly." "You know, Jennifer, I've been thinking. That technique you taught me, where did you really learn it?" Jennifer smiled mysteriously. "Want to know the truth?" "Of course. The breathing part I learned from my mother, that's true. But the part about talking through good memories, forgiving yourself, I made that up on the spot." Robert stared at her, shocked. "What do you mean, made it up?" "I knew you needed to talk about Michael to connect with love instead of guilt. The rest was maternal instinct." "Are you saying you improvised therapy?" "I prefer to say I followed my heart. Sometimes the most effective technique is simply being there for someone who's suffering." Robert laughed for the first time. "Jennifer, you're amazing. You saved an entire flight with maternal instinct. And you saved 120 lives by being brave enough to accept help. That's no small thing either. You know what's funny?" "What?" "Michael always said I should be less proud, that I should accept help from people when I needed it. It took 15 years, but I finally understood what he meant. Sometimes those who leave us behind teach lessons we only grasp years later." "What about you, Jennifer? What lesson did Kevin leave for you?" "That true love doesn't end when someone passes. It keeps living through the people we leave behind. Kevin is still alive in Jason and Ashley, and now also in all the people I help. That's a beautiful way to think. It's the only way I found to turn pain into something useful. 6 months later, the Mindful Flying program had already helped over 50 crew members. Robert and Jennifer became known throughout the company as the duo who saved not just flights, but lives. On a rainy Tuesday in September, Robert received an unexpected call. "Commander Anderson, this is Dr. Richard, the program psychologist. I have a delicate situation and would like your input." "What's it about?" "We have a young pilot, recently graduated, who lost his father, also a pilot, in an accident 2 years ago. He has panic attacks every time he's about to fly solo." Robert felt his stomach tighten. The situation was eerily familiar. "What's his name?" "Ryan Thompson, 24. Very talented, but he's about to be suspended if he doesn't resolve this." "Can I talk to him?" "That's exactly what I was going to ask. I think you're the right person to help him." That same afternoon, Robert met Ryan in a private company room. The young pilot looked visibly shaken. "Ryan, I'm Commander Anderson. I heard you've been going through some difficulties." "Commander, with all due respect, I don't think anyone can understand me. You've all had smooth careers." Robert smiled sadly. "Ryan, can I tell you a story?" "If you'd like." 15 years ago, I lost my son, Michael. And all this time, I carried a guilt that nearly cost me my career." Ryan looked up, surprised. "You lost a son?" "I did. And I learned the hardest way possible that carrying guilt doesn't honor the memory of those we've lost. Know who taught me that?" "Who?" "A flight attendant named Jennifer, who'd also lost her husband. She showed me that shared pain becomes lighter." Ryan was silent for a few minutes. "How did you manage to move past it?" "I'm still moving past it, Ryan. The difference is, I don't carry the weight alone anymore, and you don't have to carry yours alone either." "Do you really think I can fly normally again?" "I'm certain of it, but you'll need to trust some people to help you, starting with me and Jennifer." "The flight attendant who helped you?" "The same, and I can guarantee her techniques work." Ryan smiled for the first time. "You really think I can do it?" "Ryan, you're young, talented, and have a whole career ahead. Your father would be proud to see you flying, not giving up. How can you be sure?" "Because every pilot father dreams of seeing his son follow in his footsteps. And because I know if Michael were alive today, he'd encourage me to fly, not stop." 3 months later, Ryan completed his first solo flight since the trauma. Robert was in the control tower, watching every move. Jennifer was on the ground in the hangar, cheering him on. When Ryan landed perfectly, he stepped off the plane with tears in his eyes and ran to embrace Robert. "Commander, I did it. I managed to think of my father with love instead of pain." "I knew you could do it," said Robert, moved. Jennifer approached. "So Ryan, how was using the technique up there?" "Amazing, Jennifer. Every time I felt panic coming, I did the breathing exercises and thought of the stories my father told me about flying. And it worked? Perfectly. For the first time in 2 years, I truly felt connected to him while flying." Robert placed a hand on the young pilot's shoulder. "Ryan, welcome back to the sky." That night, Robert and Jennifer went out to dinner to celebrate another victory for the program. "Jennifer, can I confess something?" "Of course. When you helped me on that flight, I thought it was just about me. I never imagined it would become something so big. Sometimes the best things start when we simply decide to help one person at a time. And do you regret getting involved in all this? It must be a lot of extra work on top of your regular duties." "Commander, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "Helping you that day helped me just as much as it helped you. It reminded me why I started working as a flight attendant." "And why did you start?" "Because I wanted to take care of people. I wanted to make a difference in their lives, even if just for a few hours on a flight." "And you did, not just with me, but with hundreds of people." "We did, Commander. It's been teamwork from the very beginning." Robert raised his glass. "A toast, then, to unlikely partnerships that change lives." "To brave people who accept help when they need it," Jennifer replied, clinking her glass. "And to children who keep inspiring us, even after they're gone. To Michael and Kevin, wherever they are, Jennifer said. 2 years later, the Mindful Flying program expanded to other American airlines. Robert and Jennifer received an invitation to present their work at an international aviation conference. The night before the presentation, they reviewed the program's data in a meeting room. Jennifer, have you seen these numbers? In 2 years, we've helped over 200 people. And the best part is that many of them have become mentors. Ryan, for example, has already helped at least 10 colleagues. It's incredible how a simple technique can spread like this. It's not the technique, Commander. It's one person's willingness to reach out to another who's struggling. You know, Jennifer, sometimes I think Michael planned all this. How so? He always said I should be less closed off, that I should connect more with people. Maybe he found a way to force me into it. Could be. Kevin always said I was too good to just stay home, that I should use my talents to help more people. Seems they were right. Or maybe they're still looking after us, each in their own way. On the day of the presentation, Robert and Jennifer took the stage before an audience of over 500 aviation professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert began, I'm here today to talk about something that almost cost me my career and my sanity, the weight of unresolved grief. And I'm here, Jennifer continued, to talk about something I learned while caring for a sick mother and raising children alone. That no one has to carry their pain by themselves. They shared their story, explained the techniques, and presented the program's results. When they finished, the audience rose to their feet for a 5-minute standing ovation. After the presentation, dozens of people approached, eager to implement similar programs in their countries. Commander, said a German pilot, your story reminded me of my own struggle with depression. Thank you for having the courage to make it public. Jennifer, said a French flight attendant, your techniques saved my marriage. I used the breathing exercises with my husband when he returned from the war. By the end of the day, Robert and Jennifer were exhausted but fulfilled. You know, Jennifer, I never imagined our story would go this far. Neither did I, but I'm happy it did. Think of how many people we'll help indirectly. It's terrifying and exciting at the same time. Commander, may I ask you something? Of course. If you could go back in time, would you change anything about that day on the plane? Robert thought for a long moment. No. As painful as it was the day I freed myself. And it was the day we began to free others too. I feel the same way. It was the day I discovered my true purpose, which is to show people they're stronger than they think and that they're never truly alone. 5 years after the fateful flight, Robert was nearing retirement. On his last day as an active pilot, he chose to fly the same route he had almost failed to complete, New York to Miami. Jennifer, now the national coordinator of the Mindful Flying program, made sure to be his chief flight attendant on this special flight. Before takeoff, Robert looked at the photo of Michael on the dashboard. Son, today is my last flight as a pilot, and I want you to know that every flight since that difficult day was flown with you in mind. During the flight, everything went perfectly. Robert piloted with the serenity of someone who had found peace within himself. When they landed in Miami, the passengers, unaware of the significance of the moment, applauded as they always did for smooth landings. In the cockpit, Robert and Jennifer embraced. Commander, it's been an honor flying with you all these years. Jennifer, you're the one who taught me that flying isn't just about technique, it's about caring for the people with us. And you taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's courage. What will you do now that I'm retiring? I'll keep the program going. And you? Will you miss flying? I will, but I won't miss the guilt and pain I carried. You helped me leave that behind. 3 years later, Robert wrote a book telling his story. The title was Flying with a Peaceful Heart: How a Flight Attendant Saved More Than a Flight. The book became a bestseller, and Robert donated all royalties to expand the Mindful Flying program. At the book launch, Jennifer sat in the front row. Jennifer, Robert said during his speech, none of this would exist if you hadn't had the courage to reach out to a desperate pilot. Thank you for saving not just my life, but the lives of everyone we've helped since." Jennifer stood and said, "Commander, thank you for showing me that sometimes the most powerful technique is simply being there for someone in need. And thank you for turning your pain into purpose." 10 years after that unforgettable flight, the Mindful Flying program was active in 43 countries. Thousands of people had been helped. Ryan, the young pilot they'd assisted, was now an instructor for the program. Mrs. Rose, the anxious passenger Jennifer had calmed, had become a volunteer, helping other passengers afraid of flying. On a sunny morning, Robert visited Michael's grave for the first time in 20 years. "Hi, son," he said, placing fresh flowers. "I came to tell you I did it. I turned the pain of losing you into something that helps others." The wind rustled the trees around him, and Robert smiled. "I know you'd be proud. And I know you were part of all this, somehow. Thank you for sending Jennifer to me that day. I think you sent her to save me." That same afternoon, Jennifer visited Kevin's grave. "Honey," she said, "our breathing technique has traveled all over the world, and our children grew up kind and compassionate, just as you wanted." She sat down on the grass beside the headstone. "You know, Kevin, I've learned that true love doesn't end with goodbye. It multiplies through every life we touch. You're alive in every person I help." When the two met for dinner that night, as they had every first Thursday of the month for the past 10 years, they were at peace. "Jennifer, do you think they know?" "Know what?" "That we turned our pain into our greatest sense of purpose." "I'm sure they know, and I'm sure they're proud. You know what's most amazing?" "What?" "That it all started with you refusing to give up on a stubborn pilot who couldn't land a plane, and with a brave pilot who accepted help when he needed it most." "Jennifer, after all these years, can I confess something?" "Of course." "That day when you walked into the cockpit, for a moment, I thought you were an angel." Jennifer laughed. "And you were right. I was the angel you needed at that moment. Just like you were the angel I needed to discover my true purpose." "Do you think everyone has an angel when they need one most?" "I think everyone gets the chance to be someone's angel. The key is being open enough to recognize those moments. What if someone doesn't know how to help? Sometimes just being there is enough. Sometimes just breathing alongside someone can save a life." They raised their glasses once more, as they had for 10 years. "To Michael and Kevin," said Robert. "To all who left us but still inspire us," replied Jennifer. "And to all who stayed to keep spreading love in the world." That night, each went home knowing they had found not just a purpose, but a friendship that would last forever. Robert, now a grandfather of 3, told his grandchildren stories about airplanes and how a special flight attendant had taught him that accepting help is an act of courage. Jennifer, now a grandmother of 2 through her children Jason and Ashley, taught the children breathing exercises and shared how a brave pilot had shown her that our pain can become our greatest strength. And somewhere in the skies of America, planes continued to land safely, flown by people who had learned that flying with a peaceful heart is the most important technique of all. The end. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story of resilience and friendship. Do you think Robert made the right choice by accepting Jennifer's help? And how did you feel when you discovered her technique was partly maternal instinct? Leave a comment sharing which part moved you the most, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories.